So I was asked to give a talk about IoT and wearables. As you know, it is a very exciting market. There are a lot of talks, discussions, articles, forecasts, numbers which are being given out about IoT. The name IoT was actually coined several years ago when it was first used. What we see today is actually a very interesting kind of situation we are in with regard to the IoT and its growth. First of all, IoT goes across many segments of our industry, from communications to medical to consumer. You can see many of those devices that could be considered an IoT device are already in use and have been in use for many years. We can see them around our homes. We can see them in a thermostat, in a fire alarm. We can see them in some of our appliances. We can see them in industrial segment of the market, in end-to-end. We can see them in automotive. And we can actually see them in wearables. So it is something which is happening as we speak. So the question is, what is new? Why so much intensity and talk about IoT? And one can think about it and look at it as purely as a hype. Or one can think about it and say, okay, is something big happening? And my conclusion is something truly big is happening with regard to the IoT. The question is now, what is it? The phrase IoT means the ability to connect many different devices or edge points eventually to a cloud. It's a big ecosystem. It involves endpoints. It involves gateways, which could be on a smartphone or a router, and it includes data analytics. It includes cloud-based services, and it includes people in our industry from all segments, from engineering to marketing to business to banking to people who provide their services and want to sell them through the IoT. So we are talking about a huge ecosystem. And I can tell you it is truly exciting to see such a momentum and to see how it is going to drive the next 5 or 10 years. And it is such a big universe that I do not consider myself in any way an expert to talk about this universe. So I will talk about the certain areas that I am involved with and I'm engaged with and try to share with you my view and my vision in those areas. Among many quotations, many market numbers that I have seen, there is one that really has caught my eye and I truly think is the engine behind the growth of the IoT. And that is a quotation that was given by Gartner, which said, let me just read it. By 2018, 50% of the Internet of Things solutions will be provided by the startups which are less than 3 years old. We can estimate what the Internet of Things will be like now, but we know what most of the things that will exist in 2018, 20, or 25 are yet to be invented. Now remember, we are talking about probably 50 billion connected nodes by 2020, 2020 timeframe. A good portion of those nodes are yet to be invented. For me, that gives way for a really exciting environment for us. For us as an engineers, for us as a technology providers, all of a sudden I feel like I'm in heaven because there's not one day that I go to work that we don't have a meeting about IoT or what is our next product is going to look like or what is the next technology that we require is going to look like. It is exciting because we can see the reality of what is happening real time and trying to grasp pieces of technology and put it together. It is expected, if you look at the statistics, it is expected that the size of the industry that will be fueled by IoT is going to be about $3 to $6 trillion by 2020 and beyond. That is a huge industry. Of course, the majority of it goes to service providers, but still, there are going to be 50 billion connected nodes. There will be a lot of technology which has to be developed for that. So it is a very exciting time to be in semiconductor industry. The challenge for us as suppliers, technology suppliers to this industry is, what do we need to do, which eventually could be summarized in 3 words: availability, simplicity, and cost. And I'll try to explain that in the coming slides. If you take the universe of the wearables, which is just one aspect of the IoT, correct? You see many different ideas and many different applications. Probably the only thing which has really made it in the market in a major way, and a lot of us, or some of us may be using it, are the wristbands or the smartwatches. and probably maybe less than 5% of the people here even use those. So, but that is the only thing which is truly out in the marketplace from a wearable point of view, deployed in a major way. There are a lot of discussions, there are a lot of products in development in different phases, from development, ideas, conceptions, promotions, early launch, which can cover anything from glass, the ways you want to interact with your multimedia, clothing, shoes, things that would help you to monitor your body, your health, your movement, your activity. So there are a lot of ideas which are at work to make those happen. Then we got to look at ourselves and say, okay, what do we do as a technology supplier? Okay, what is my role? What am I supposed to do in this? If every pair of shoe is eventually going to have a sensor embedded inside of it that can actually monitor your activity, think of it this way: simplicity, availability, and cost. So that device has to connect with something, which is mostly your smartphone, right? So how simple that connection would be. I doubt very much if most of us want to go buy a pair of shoes and a pair of socks and then go sit on our computer, try to connect it to a USB and program it so it works. No. Whatever we buy has to automatically connect, it has to be seamless, and it has to be ready to be used, right? The form factor is very important. It's got to be so small that you don't see it, you don't feel it, especially if you wear it on your body. It has to be rugged so it doesn't break as you're trying to do some activity with it. If it is a health monitoring device, it has to be certified and it has to go through its own sequence. So we're now looking at the universe, which is expanding, which has different requirements. And our job is to provide simplicity, cost, and availability. And think of it this way. Look at how we went through the revolution of the PC industry because there was the availability of the processing units that actually enable the computer, right? Then we went to the mobile and the mobility and the cell phone, communication processor, the communication technology. Also looked at the fact that how prevalent the smartphones are today, mainly because, not mainly because, to a large extent because there is such a thing as a touch technology. So it's intuitive, you can use your fingers and run through different applications. So simple technologies like this all of a sudden enable something to happen. Today, if we look at a different aspect of what is being developed in our world, we can already conclude that this whole momentum toward the wearable is starting to happen. I was at CES in January, and CES is usually has been about many different new innovations which is coming to the market. For many years it was about PCs, and then became mobile and cell phones and smartphones, TVs. This was the year that I really felt CES this year was more than anything else about IoT and connected devices. How many of you guys went to the CES this year? Did you walk across the hallways and you saw all these booths and new companies that did not exist 2 or 3 years before, but now they are there providing their solutions? So the momentum is already taking place. The movement is already taking place. Those devices are becoming available to the point that now we got to start asking ourselves, okay, how big is this thing going to be? Because as people who have to manage businesses, we have to constantly think, okay, how much are we going to invest? Should we invest that many dollars in the product development that eventually becomes an IoT device, or should we stay in some of our own traditional businesses? So we got to believe in something to make that investment, right? And I have come to believe that this IoT market as a whole will be bigger than the prior revolution. I think it will be bigger than the smartphone. Because our imagination can really run wild, and the number of devices and the different type of applications that could be created are so wide and so enormous. I think we're looking at the beginning of a huge market to grow beyond what is being perceived. The year those number of devices that could be used, but I think it is going to be bigger than that because it's not clear what exactly every one of those devices are going to do yet. So fundamentally, we're going to ask ourselves a few questions. Okay, what is the practical use case for all these IoT devices? What is going to be driving that trend? What is the reason behind it? Is it a technical reason? Is it a fashion reason? Is it a social phenomenon? What is it? So we got to think about those factors. Put it all together to see what does it all mean, and eventually we got to see what are the technologies which are needed to break the code of these wearable devices. And I'd like to touch a little bit on that aspect of it in my presentation. What is very interesting is If you go and do a research and try to figure out what is the growth rate for wearable devices, you will find yourself that there isn't that much data available to project for you what's going to happen by 2015 or 2020. If you go and look at data to see how many cars will be sold, or how many electric cars will be sold, or how many TVs will be sold, or what will be the volume for the smartphones, you will find yourself in a much easier way to find data projecting it all the way to 2015 and 20. But if you go after wearables, you will have a hard time finding what I call high quality data to make a forecast. And the reason for it is, we have all different type of ideas of what those devices are, but it is very difficult to put it together, to decide, okay, what is the market going to do in 2015 and 2020? How many devices are going to be sold? So as a result, I can decide how much money am I going to invest on this product. And that is really explaining the situation we are in. We see the technologies which are coming together, we see the innovative ideas. It is very difficult to precisely pinpoint what should be done beyond the next 3 to 4 years. What is the market going to look like? And to me, that makes it a heaven for the entrepreneurs. People who have the right ideas coming in, taking advantage of this technology and making something big to happen. So we have to look at the trends. We have to see, okay, what are the trends which are going to make this momentum? What are the trends that are going to drive these things to happen, right? Those 50 billion units cannot only come from the wristbands, right, or glasses. There are not that many people in the world who want to have that many different type of wristbands, right? So there have got to be reasons behind factors that will drive this momentum and this growth. And the entrepreneurs who get the right idea, remember, more than 50% of the companies which are going to invent those devices are yet to be born. The entrepreneurs, which is yourselves, who can think about the right ideas of what those products would be, will find themselves in a great situation financially and emotionally and in every other way in the coming 10 to 20 years. Now let me talk about a couple of trends that I see that, in my opinion, will be a good growth vector for the wearable devices. The first one is what we call the self-quantification. So think about the idea to have devices and the ability to constantly collect the information around you. It could be your devices which monitor your health, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your sugar content, your temperature. Put it together, analyze it, and then that data could be used to measure your wellness, your health, to help you make the right decision about your diet, your exercise, your movements, your habits. Something that could be used for the elderly to constantly stay on the system so they could be monitored from a health point of view. Things that can actually help you stay younger, finding ways to help you stay younger because of the level of activity and the way you interact with your environment. This self-quantification, as a concept, can be directly tied to what I call the sensor technology. Sensors can bring the type of technology and the features together to enable that type of self-quantification to become a reality from a product point of view. And if you expand it bigger, you can even think of contextual computing. It would be true to say that the contextual computing will be the dominant force behind driving the technology and the technology for the IoTs. What does that mean? I mean, this is a phrase which was actually coined also by Georgia Tech researchers many years ago. It is the idea that you get connected to your environment, where the devices around you can constantly absorb, collect information, and that could be information about the environment, could be information about things which are in your proximity, could be information about your body. Analyze that data, provide it to you, and that would help you to augment your ability to interact with your environment, take care of yourself better, right? This is going to be a major idea behind what eventually, in my opinion, the IoT will be, especially in the health area. So if you take this contextual computing and the self-quantification, put it together, then we say, okay, what do we do as technologists to actually take advantage of these two trends and make a real product, and that real product eventually become commercialized? So we need to think about a few things. We've got to think about making devices which are transparent, which means they have a form factor which can actually be easily on our bodies without being noticed. So the form factor, the size, the ruggedness. There are going to be devices to use. As I said earlier, if I want to buy a pair of Nike shoes to go running, I do not want to program the shoes. I just want to put them on and I want to go running. I just want to be able to see on my PDA how fast I'm running and how am I running. If I'm a bicyclist and I want to be a professional bicyclist and I want to learn how to pedal better for efficiency, I want the information to be available for me statistically without me having to worry about it, correct? So there are many things like that have to come together, which are all technology driven to make those devices suitable for IoT. The price has to be right, correct? Many of the products we're talking about as wearables cannot afford to embed a piece of electronics more than $2 or $3 or $5 based on what it is. So you've got to be products at the right price, with the right footprint, easy connected, very seamless to use. Putting it all together, we eventually start to formalize the idea of, okay, what are all these IoT devices going to look like? And in some ways, our industry, so I'm coming from the technology industry, semiconductor industry, I see my role as creating the ability, creating the products that can actually enable other technologies, other parts of our business, service providers, people who want to actually create cloud-based services to take those devices and make a commercial idea out of it. And that is the ecosystem which has to come together over the years to really fuel that growth. So I tried to take a look at the systems that we're talking about around this trend just to see, okay, where are all the pieces? So if you look at the systems that we're talking about gateways or smartphones or PDA devices which have the ability to become a source of gathering information and passing information and analyzing it for you. There are going to be the cloud services that provide you the connectivity. And then, of course, at the end will be the wearable devices. Let's say in this case, the health devices. Within those devices, there are 3 or 4 very critical pieces of technology which are very important. An embedded processing unit, some sort of a connectivity. Most probably, in most cases, they're all going to be wireless connectivity, and the ability to manage and interact with the sensor. And the sensor is going to be the device that interacts with the environment around it. So this is going to be what we will be doing, at least in my industry, trying to figure out how we bring these devices together that in most times have to run on a very small coin battery for almost a year to 2 years before we have to replace the battery. So this is the challenge that we have. If I break it down to the key technology enablers, and that will be what will fuel our industry, is one, the ability to create extremely low power processors or controllers. Devices that can run on a very small amount of power and can last a very long time on a battery and have the ability to connect with one of the given wireless protocols or coexistence of the multiple wireless protocols. So that will be the first key ingredient and element of this device. Any of those wearable devices at its heart will have one of those low power MCUs, which is wireless connected, embedded in it. The next one is the sensor, and that is where we will see a big, if you look at the history of what has happened to the sensors and how they've adopted in the smartphones and many other applications in the last 5 years, you will almost be amazed how fast that technology has moved. And it could be even more amazing to imagine how fast it is going to move in the coming 5 to 10 years to enable that world of the IoT devices. And we look at sensors in many different ways. It could be motion detection sensors, which can be a gyro, an accelerometer, or an altimeter. It could be an environmental sensor. It could be chemical sensor, air quality sensor, a temperature sensor. But all those sensors, the technology of putting them together, having an algorithmic way to be able to collect the information, manage the information, process the information, and create the proper signal that eventually goes to the next stage. So that whole science of what I call sensor fusion becomes probably one of the most critical elements of making these wearable devices to come to reality. And I can tell you there is a huge amount of innovation and progress which is yet to be made in the area of the sensors and the sensor fusion to bring us closer to this augmented reality of the wearable devices. And the last piece is the big analytics. A lot of data has to be collected. Just think of different examples. Let's say I want to monitor my health. So I need to have the ability to collect all my own signals and vital signs and process it and have the statistics of how it looks like. But at the same time, I want to have the ability to compare myself to the people who live around me or the people in the world or in the country I live in. So the big data analytics that has to bring it all together, constantly process that information, pass it to you through the cloud, to your device, and to tell you where you are. That is going to be yet another very big piece of the technology which has to be provided for this industry to grow. If we put and bring all of this together, we can start to think about, okay, how now will the IoT devices or the wearable devices shape the future of certain industries? In this case, the healthcare industry, right? If we create that ability for us to have the capability to monitor ourselves in many ways, our vital signs, have a way to actually regulate our exercise, our eating habits, a way to do drug delivery, if that is what we're taking, could be anything to do for our blood sugar or other type of medication, have a way to statistically compare ourselves to the norm of the society and push ourselves to the edge. We all of a sudden will transform the healthcare industry from managing health to preventing disease. So all of a sudden the healthcare industry will be revolutionized in a very interesting way. You know it will be coming. It is not a question of if, it's just a question of when. As all these trends are starting to take place, then you can start to say, okay, what is going to happen to the size of the market, right? Each one of us individually will be connected to so many devices, and those devices are no longer just for the fashion look of it. They will be managing something which is extremely important to us, our health, our children's health, our parents' health. Now you start to see, okay, this IoT and the wearable market, as they are talking about, is substantially going to be bigger maybe than what we can imagine. We can truly revolutionize one aspect of our life because of the wearable devices. So to sum it up, we see an IoT which is growing in many segments of our industries. We see a lot of new devices and new technologies which are yet to be invented, to augment, to help to grow that market. The size of the market, in my opinion, stays still very unknown, but can be categorized as extremely large. There is room for a lot of innovation across the entire segment of this industry. The segment that I find the most interesting are the wearable devices, because there is more invention which can happen there than in some of the other segments. So in summary, I think contextual computing enabled by technology availability will be a major driver for our industry. I think the ability to bring arithmetic embedded processing together with a sensor fusion will be a key enabler to drive this market. And many industries, but in particular the healthcare industry, will be revolutionized. But people like yourself will be doing in the coming years. So my best wishes for you, and I hope you are going to drive this industry to even bigger heights. Thank you.